Hello and welcome to the webinar on project management. In today's webinar, we are going to talk about quality management. As you know, quality management is definitely one of the most important processes that we have. Out of the different knowledge areas, like there are 10 knowledge areas within the PMP or PMBOK 6th edition, and there are 49 processes. So one of the important knowledge areas that we talk about is the quality management. So quality management consists of various processes within it. And today's topic is around quality management. Let's get started with quality management. So quality is always at the center of the constraint triangle that we talk about. So apart from the cost, the schedule, the resources, etc., quality is one of the important constraints of the project. And ultimately, quality is the responsibility of all the team members working on the project. But the project manager is ultimately responsible for quality. We will talk about what are the various aspects as a project manager you need to ensure that you take care of while managing quality on your project. So in today's topic and the discussion that we are going to talk about the project quality management, the quality management overview, and quality management processes that are involved into managing the quality on the project. And this particular webinar is aligned to the PMBOK 6th edition. So this is definitely in line with the latest changes that have been done by the PMI in PMBOK. So let's get started with the project quality management as a topic. Under this topic, as we were talking about, we will be discussing about the various processes that are involved into managing quality on the project. But before we get on to the processes that we have, let's quickly understand about quality management. Now, as we all know, quality is all about whether we are producing the outcome of the project in the form of product or result or the service that we are producing by the end of that project. Is it fit for use or not? Is it fit for purpose or not? Does it meet the customer requirements or not? So ultimately, we need to make sure that we check on that. So whether that project meets the needs it was originally created to meet. And that is what is ensured by the quality management. It also ensures that all project activities that are necessary for designing, planning, implementing a project are effective and efficient. And that is ensured by following the quality management as one of the important plans that we create on the project. So let's understand a bit more around quality management as a concept when we work on the project. So there are a few things that we need to definitely make sure we are doing as a part of the quality. One is, of course, the verification. The continuous verification is what is expected by the team and the project manager. Like, for example, a simple verification could be a traceability matrix. We ensure to have a traceability matrix on the project so that we verify the requirements that we have gathered from the customers. Are we incorporating those while doing designing, while doing coding, while doing testing, while deploying, etc.? So that simple verification really helps us. And it's just not the backwards traceability, but also the forwards traceability that we ensure that we are doing. So that's a quick example of the verification. Precision. Now, whenever we talk about quality, we also ensure that it should be precise. Precision is all about doing it consistently. And when we do consistently right, it actually ensures the precision. Now, we must have heard about these terms like precision and accuracy. So, accuracy is when we actually hit the target, we are accurate. But when we hit the target 10 times consistently, we are not only accurate, but also we are precise. And that is what reflects in the quality. So, whatever the outcome that we are producing in the form of that process, or even for that matter, the result or a service that we are producing, we need to make sure that it's not only accurate, but also it is precisely so that we are consistently producing the same outcome in the form of product, service, or a result that we are committing to the customer. So accuracy and precision definitely are two important facets that we talk about always under quality. Tolerance. There is something called as a tolerance, and we set the tolerance limits and we come up with sort of a control chart in order to understand the outcome that we are producing. Does it fit into the tolerance limits or not? So we have upper specification limits and we have lower specification limits. And the product that we are producing in the form of outcome of the process or a project, we make sure that it fits into the tolerance limit. Anything above that, my customer wouldn't accept. And if there are too many such a things that I'm producing which are not accepted by the customer, obviously it's going to cost me. And that's going to be the cost of quality, which we will talk about later as well. Validation. So continuous validation and verification, as we were talking about, is something which is integral part of the maintaining quality and ensuring quality while we're working on any project. So whatever the requirements that customer has given us, once we build that feature, we need to make sure that that feature is validated as per the acceptance criteria given by the customer. And we'll talk more about some of these aspects around quality. So quality management overview is what we're going to start with at the moment. Now, when we talk about the overview in terms of understanding the quality, we also need to understand the various trends and emerging practices that we talk about in quality these days. So starting with the customer satisfaction. Now, customer satisfaction is ultimately one of the goals that every organization would strive to achieve through the product, service, or the results that are getting produced as an outcome of the project that we work on. So even we talk about as a part of the project constraints these days, apart from quality, schedule, and the other constraints like risk, resources, one of the important thing is also around customer satisfaction. Are my customers satisfied with the outcome that I'm producing or not? And if they're not satisfied, then we need to really find out the reasons for customer satisfaction. First of all, whether I'm really checking my customers are happy or not. Am I conducting the customer surveys, feedbacks, and interviews? Am I incorporating the feedbacks that I'm getting back into the process of developing that product, service, or result or not? So there are various things that we need to ask to ourselves as a team. Continual improvement. Continual improvement should be always at the heart of the quality. The reason being, it's about the consistently improving the way we are doing things, right? The way the process is running, or for that matter, are we challenging the status quo? How am I improving on a daily basis? There could be various ways through which we can do that. It could be implementation of a Kaizen methodology or a Six Sigma or lean way of working, etc. But continual improvement is definitely one of the important things that teams needs to ensure that we do. Management responsibility. Now, as we just mentioned, that quality is everyone's responsibility. So how come we miss on management? Ultimately, management is the one who is going to empower the project teams. Management is the one who is going to ensure that the teams have got enough resources to build the product. So if that is not done properly, then obviously it's going to have an impact over quality. Management should also help teams in removing the impediments, bottlenecks that are there within what we are producing and not achieving the quality. So that is where management would come into picture. Mutually beneficial partnership with suppliers. When we talk about producing any product, I guess without having the partnership with suppliers, it's just not possible. Now, when we partner with our suppliers, we need to make sure that it's a mutually beneficial partnership. We need to make them partner into what we are producing and not just treat them as some third party vendors. So that's the change in the mindset that we need to bring out in order to get maximum out of this partnership and the relations. So let's keep talking about some of the tailoring considerations that we should be taking into consideration while working on the quality management. Now, all the processes of quality management, they needs to be applied in a tailored or a customized way in order to make them unique to the project that you're working on. Because as we know, project is a unique endeavor. We produce a product or service or a result out of that project, and it's unique in itself. So let's talk about how and where can we do this kind of a customization or process tailoring. PMBOK 6th edition specifically talks a lot about process tailoring. Let's take a few examples. For example, policy, compliance, and auditing. Now, whichever the project that you're working on, you have to do the customization or tailoring around the way you're working, considering the compliance requirements or audit requirements. Like, for example, I still remember when I was working on a project where we had to comply with SOX compliance. That means the requirements were completely different over there. Like we had to take the code freeze approvals at least 14 days before we put code into production environment. That was something very unique to that compliance requirement. And that was audited as well. So we had to really retain those audit trails and had to retain those evidences which we can then produce when the audit is conducted. So that's a very quick example, which may not be required again on all the projects. So here is a question here from Ramesh, and the question is around what is SOX compliance? All right. So I understand from where this question has come. So I did mention a bit about SOX. Now, SOX compliance is just one example. Those are basically the regulations that are levied by US governments. So those companies who are registered under US, any of the stock exchange, let's say New York Stock Exchange, so we need to furnish all the data which actually goes into profit and loss statement or which goes into accounting. And we need to make sure that all this data is furnished to the US government for audit and for review. And SOX came in after the frauds that we may have heard about, like, for example, Enroll or WordCom, those kind of frauds that have happened during early 2000. And after that, US government launched SOX. Of course, this training is not around SOX really, but you can read more about that. But just very quickly to answer your question, that is just one of the regulations that we talk about today. But if you're working in healthcare industry, you might have to face different regulation. If you work in insurance, there are different regulations. If you are working in banking, there are different regulations. So what's important is to acknowledge those and see how I can tailor my process in order to adhere to those regulations. The second aspect is around standards and regulatory compliance. Sometimes there are certain mandatory standards that are to be followed. So we need to ensure that we are adhering to those mandatory standards if we haven't already considered as a part of the project. Continuous improvement, challenging the status quo. Various methodologies these days are popular when it comes to continuous improvement. And I'm sure some of those methodologies you may have already used yourself. Agile is the best example. Agile really helps us improve on a continuous basis because we do retrospections, we gather lessons learned, we implement the improvements out of that. 5S is another methodology, Six Sigma is another one, Lean is there. So many of them, or simple Kanban way of working also helps us in continuously improve ourselves. Stakeholder engagement. Since we talk about quality and ultimately all these requirements that we work on, any project comes from the stakeholders. So we have to engage them throughout the project and not just at the beginning of the project or towards the end of the project. So tailoring around these aspects would really help us gain a competitive advantage or would gain in terms of getting the better outcome of the project. Now let's talk about the quality management process. So far, I just introduced you the topic. We just spoke about what is quality, what are the different aspects around quality. We also spoke about why the tailoring is required when we work on the quality, etc. Now let's actually get into the process part. As I mentioned to you, there are 49 different processes within PMBOK 6th edition, and there are 10 different knowledge areas. We also have 5 different process groups. We are picking up quality management processes for you in today's training. Now, this is just the gist of it. I would really encourage you to enroll for the course in order to get more detail around quality management. In webinar today, we are just taking and learning about a very high level aspects around quality. But when we do the deep dive, where while delivering training, we actually cover in detail around various things that we're supposed to be talking around in quality. So let's talk about now the process. There are 3 processes as a part of quality management. It starts with planning part. We have to plan quality. We can't just ignore that. We have to manage quality. Once we put your plan in place, that's where we decide high level approach. What's my commitment to manage quality on my project? And once I give that commitment through this plan, then I have to execute that plan. And that execution is about managing quality. And once I start executing, I have to also check whether I'm executing it as per the plan or not. And that's where the control aspect comes into picture. So we have planning quality management, managing quality, and control quality. 3 processes that are embedded as a part of the quality management. Let's start with the first one, which is plan quality management. Now, as like any other knowledge areas, whenever we cover, we always talk about what are the inputs to that process, what are the tools and techniques that we use, and what output do we expect out of that. Similarly, we will also be talking about what are the inputs. So before we getting onto the input part, let's just talk about a bit what is plan. So planning quality management is all about identifying what are the key requirements in terms of the quality. It could be with respect to the standards that we're going to follow. It could be with respect to the commitments that we're giving. How are we going to maintain quality, manage quality on the project? What's the approach that we're going to follow in terms of ensuring quality is built in this product? So, in general, this is going to really provide you with some guidance and this will give some direction. So, even if the project manager is not there one fine day, and if somebody wants to look into what is the quality that we're going to maintain on this project, so they can easily refer to this plan and learn about this approach. So, how are we going to manage the quality, verify the quality throughout the project is what is maintained and mentioned in this plan. Typically, we create the plan at the beginning of the project itself, and quality management plan would then become a part of your project plan when we actually begin working. Let's now get started off with some of the inputs to the quality management. And we will go one by one, probably starting off with, of course, the project charter. So when we start talking about the planning part, we need to refer to the project charter because project charter will certainly give us an idea about those initial high level requirements that will come from the project charter. And as we just now understood about quality, that it's about fit for use, fit for purpose, and it's about ensuring that we deliver the requirements that we have agreed upon with customers. So those initial requirements will certainly come from the project charter. We would also know which are those stakeholders whom I need to engage while creating the plan, etc. The other is project management plan in itself. Few things we have already captured over there. And anyways, quality management plan is a subsidiary plan of project management plan. That means we have to refer to that for sure. Project documents. We need to also refer to different project documents while working on quality part. And the project documents, obviously, we need to make sure that these project documents that we are referring to are something like, for example, assumption log. So I need to know what are some of the assumptions that I need to factor in while working on the planning quality aspects. Then we also need to know how are we going to establish traceability metrics on the project? How are we going to capture risks, for example? What about the stakeholder register? Can I have access to that so that I can update if required? So those are some of the examples of the documents that we talk about here. And apart from that, there are two inputs always we talk about in almost all processes, and that's enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. They could be like, for example, as a part of assets, there could be certain templates that I need to use. There could be a certain, in terms of enterprise environmental factors, I would also compare the quality with that comes out of the commitment that I'm going to give as a company in the market. So there are certain general guidelines that are available that I would refer to as well. So these are some of the inputs that we talk about. Let's now talk about some of the tools and techniques when we plan quality into the project. So starting with expert judgment. Expert judgment is one of the tools and techniques that we talk about here. And as you would agree, expert judgment is all about engaging my SMEs into getting inputs from them. And probably we need to also take into consideration the tailoring aspect. So on this project, based on the experience of these people, what do I need to do? So something which is very easy to do as well as very valuable. Data gathering. Data gathering is definitely another tool which is very useful. We can gather data through various ways. One of the example could be benchmarking. I can compare the quality with what's published in the market. It could be through various publications or something which is even, for that matter, the standards that are there. So I can compare it with the past. I can compare it with the standards or the competition as well. So that's kind of a benchmarking, right? I need to be right up to the competition in the market. So if it is not there, then how I can improve ourselves in terms of the quality outcomes that we're producing. Brainstorming is a simple data gathering technique that helps us in generating the data and the ideas, etc. I can also conduct interviews with few people in order to gather data. So these are some of the examples. Data analysis. So once we gather data while putting the plan for quality, I need to also ensure that I do analysis of the data that I've gathered. For that, I might have to use different techniques, like simple could be cost benefit analysis. Can I just check the cost of quality? What is the benefit am I going to get out of that? At the same time, what is the cost of implementation of the quality requirements against the benefit, as I just mentioned? Or cost of quality in itself, which will cover your cost of conformance, cost of non-conformance. Now, as we know, cost of conformance is all about, in order to make sure the quality is built in, what is the cost that is required. So for that quality assurance or the audits or different things that I'm going to use on the project, it could be reviews, etc. What's the cost that is required for that? And non-conformance cost could be very high at times. One of the best examples could be the Volkswagen scam of the emission that we know the kind of amount that Volkswagen had to bear is like huge. That's cost of non-conformance, I would say, because it not only affects the cost, but also it affects the reputation of the company as a whole. So that could be another example. And we will talk many more such example in our training. Decision making is another thing. So as a part of decision making, again, it's pretty straightforward, right? We have to make decisions between the options that are available. So we'll also look into some tools that we can use in order to make a decision as well in the actual training. Data representation. So once we gather data, we can actually represent that data through various ways. Like for example, we can create a simple flowchart of the data that I have gathered. So let's say I have gathered some data from the process, I can just put together in a flowchart. Or I can create some sort of a logical data model, or even for that matter, some matrix diagrams. All of that really helps us in visualizing things. I think mind map could be one of the simplest example. We just put together what's there on mind in a particular format, in a particular way, and that really helps us in representing the data. Test and inspection planning would certainly involve our considerations about various testing things that we're going to do in order to, of course, inspect the product, in order to ensure that we inspect the deliverable or a service that we are giving to our customers. And there could be various ways, as we all know, like alpha and beta releases that we do in the market these days, or the various inspections that we do, or for that matter, the field test could be another simple example. And then we have meetings, which is pretty straightforward to understand. So these inputs in terms of the different tools and techniques would certainly help us in putting together the plan. Obviously, what do we expect by the end of this? We certainly expect outcome of this process would be the quality management plan itself. We'll also be able to gather some quality metric in terms of, now we can certainly think of as a part of the quality metric, we can think of various things. What kind of a quality metric that you want to capture on your project? And that quality metric would certainly help you in ensuring that you are tracking the quality. So it could be, for example, the defect data, it could be defect age, it could be the defects per release, etc., etc. So that could be just one quick example. Project management plan will get updated with this outcome, and even the project documents. Like I have given you examples of assumption log or traceability matrix or stakeholder list that we're creating. So that might also get updated as a result of this. So this covers our plan quality management. We saw what are the inputs, we saw tools and techniques, and we also covered the outcomes that we can get in the form of different outputs of this process, of course. Let's now talk about managed quality. So as a part of quality management, we have plan quality, and then the second part is about managed quality. It's all about execution. Now, since we have a plan in place, it's time for us to execute that plan. Let's talk a bit about it. It's all about translating that plan into your executable quality activities. So whatever we have committed to through this plan, now we have to execute that. It will also help us in making sure that the quality policies are embedded into the project. And that is certainly the responsibility of the management to make sure that all the teams are ensuring that embedding of the quality policies into their project plans, etc. It also helps us in improving the probability of meeting the quality objectives. And not only that, identifying the ineffective processes and cause of poor quality. So it's all about identifying those aspects and fixing those aspects, act upon those gaps. So when we have started executing on the plans, we would certainly be able to come to know about these things. So let's do a bit of a deep dive, and starting with, of course, the inputs. So let's start talking about inputs to manage quality. And we'll, of course, talk about the first input, which is the project management plan in itself. Now, what will come out of the project management plan is the quality management plan. Because quality management plan is the subsidiary management plan, which is a part of your project management plan. So that will come in project documents. So as we've already spoke about the various examples of the project documents that we can think of. And not only that, now project documents, I've already gave you a few examples. Like it could also include like assumption log, I've told you, or for that matter, the traceability metrics or the stakeholder list, etc. And the next one is about the OPAs, and EEF is what we talk about. But in this case specifically, we'll be talking about the OPAs. So what is organizational process assets? So when we talk about the managed quality, we would need to factor in a lot of different assets that might have been created. Those needs to be used, as I gave you example of certain standards, templates, those we need to adhere to when we work on any of the organization. So we need to always refer to that. Usually the central team within the organization working for quality ensures that these assets are being communicated across to all the teams so that teams start using them. So let's get started with the next aspect about managing quality, which is tools and techniques. What kind of tools can we use? Starting with the tools for data gathering, which we already discussed about the kind of tools that we can use for gathering data, like interviews and brainstorming sessions, etc. We can talk a bit on the data analysis tools. What kind of analysis can we do? So once we gather data, now this data is about once we start executing your plan, some data gets generated on the project. That data needs to be captured. That data needs to be then analyzed. We could do alternative analysis. We could analyze various documents that are there on the project. We could do simple process analysis in order to find out the opportunities for us to improve that process. Or importantly, we could also undertake a root cause analysis. Because now we are executing the plan, we might come across certain issues to find out why that particular issue has occurred. Let's find out the root cause of that issue so that it will not occur again. Audits is another important thing that we always do as a part of the managed quality. I hope audits are pretty straightforward thing. It could be internal audits, it could be external audits. So depending on the kind of audits that are conducted in your organization, decision making is something again pretty straightforward. We make decision based on the kind of data that we've gathered and the design for X. Now, design for X is all about design for excellence, or we call it as DFX. Now, this is basically a set of technical guidelines. Now, those technical guidelines could be applied during the design phase while we build the product. And that really helps us in optimize few things around obviously the design. Like there are lots of things that are evolving around design. So design thinking could be one such example. So design for excellence is all about those technical guidelines, all the practices. Like one of the simple thing that we do is simple design. We keep design simple so that we can evolve later. Now, this will certainly help us to improve the characteristics of the product that we're working on. Like for example, cost reduction, or we talk about quality improvements, or better performance, right? Or the customer satisfaction. A lot of these things that we can think of. So those could be achieved while ensuring that some of the technical guidelines are followed. For example, if we talk about the performance, and if you do not incorporate the technical guidelines into the design itself, then how would you be able to expect a better performance of the product once you develop that application, put it into production, and then if the performance is what is one of the expectation and that you miss to factor in into design, it's going to affect the performance. Data representation. Now, how do we represent data? We've already spoke about it. Various ways through which we can represent the data, like flowcharts, process diagrams, etc., that we spoke about. Problem solving skills, again, various ways through which we can solve problems is what it covers about. So we'll be talking about in detail in the training when we conduct how do we do that, and the quality improvement methods. There are various quality improvement methods which I did mention to you, some of them at, for example, plan, do, check, act, something which was introduced by Deming, and Six Sigma is another example, or Kaizen for that matter, or continuous improvement. So all those things really helps us in achieving better quality outcomes. Now, since we talk about managed quality, what do we expect as the outcome of the managed quality process? We would get quality reports. Now, quality reports, again, as we spoke a bit on it, as far as the metric is concerned, but in this case, we basically talk about how we can put this data that we're getting during execution of the quality plan into some format. Now, that format could be sort of a graphical format or some numerical or some qualitative stuff that we can put together that will actually help us in providing lots of information which we can refer and take corrective decisions. And that corrective decision will in turn help us in meeting the quality expectations. So this would also include, for that matter, some of the quality management issues that get escalated to the next level, or for that matter, some of the improvements that are suggested, the corrective actions that we have taken, or for that matter, the kind of rework that required to be done. For that matter, even few things that I mentioned to you earlier, like defects data or the bug repair that was done, or the kind of inspection that is done and the outcome of that, etc. And even you can summarize all the findings and put it together. So that essentially includes your quality reports. And there could be certain organizational process assets in order to provide sort of templates how to produce this. Test evaluation documents. Now, test and evaluation document is all about like what are some of the achievements of the quality objectives that we can put together. Like for example, checklists or detailed requirement traceability metrics. Now, those are like test and evaluation documents, right? Traceability metrics is one good example. Checklist is one of the best examples that we always talk about. Those really helps us in evaluating things. Change requests. Now, change request might get initiated as a result of the progress that we are seeing, and that change request then needs to be incorporated back into the project. Project documents will get updated, the ones that I mentioned earlier, and project management plan would also get updated if there is any change that we come across. So this covers entire outcomes or the outputs that we expect out of the managed quality process. So we saw planning part of quality. That's where we give commitments to our customers by putting things into planning, the approach, etc. And then we start executing on that through the managed quality process. And then we are going to talk about the next important process, which is about controlling quality. Now, this is the process where we basically talk about now how can we make sure what we are doing is it in line with the process or not. So it's about monitoring and recording the results. So we've started executing the plan. Now we started getting some outcomes. It's important for us to record the results of those outcomes and we monitor it whether it is as per the quality management activities or not. If there is any gap, we need to act upon those gaps. So in a way, it is going to help us assessing the performance in order to ensure the project outcomes are complete, correct, and meet customer expectations. Not only that, it will also verify that the project deliverables and work meet the requirements specified by key stakeholders for final acceptance. So there has to be a continuous verification and validation that needs to be happening as a part of the control quality as well. Right, so let's get started with control quality aspects. Of course, we'll start with inputs. We can't miss the input project plan in itself. And project plan will also give you the quality management plan for us to refer to. That's where we have already mentioned about how are you going to do control quality activities. So we can refer to those. Project documents, the one that I've already mentioned to you. Some of those documents we need to refer to and also needs to update later. Approved change request. Again, we need to check whether that approved change request is incorporated or not. And if it is incorporated, if there is any gap, etc. So if at all there is any approved change request. Deliverables. Now, those deliverables could be the ones that I have already verified on the project. So those verified deliverables, that means I have tested those deliverables. I have verified those deliverables as per the customer requirements. So that is what it covers. And the work performance information. So work performance information will be nothing but the data that gets generated once we start executing the plans. So how are we performing against the plan? How are we with respect to the schedule or quality or for that matter, budget, etc. Enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets is something which is standard, which will really help us in referring to certain things that are there at an organizational level. And then we talk about certain tools and techniques which will help us in performing these tasks. So let's talk about what are those. One is data gathering. We did speak about some of the examples of how do we gather data. So that's one thing. Testing product and evaluations. So since we're talking about controlling quality, we need to make sure that we verify the deliverables against the customer specifications that are given. So this verification and validation needs to be happening on a continuous basis. Not only that, we also need to make sure that including the approved change, we have tested as per the expectations. So this is something which is an ongoing process as a part of the control quality. It's an ongoing activity. Data analysis. So once we gather data out of these techniques, it's time for us to analyze that data and draw actions, which will help us in, of course, taking the corrective and the preventive actions. Like, for example, the outcome that we are producing, is it within the control limits or not? What are the tolerance limits, the upper specification, lower specification limits? And the outcomes that I'm getting, are they falling within those or not? So a lot of data that I'm generating out of the implementation of the quality commitments, now it's time for us to analyze that data. Inspection. So I need to regularly go on inspecting and adapting as well. So various opportunities through which we can do the inspection. So for that, whatever you have committed, how are you going to do the inspection? That would be a part of your plan. So you can refer to that. And you would also represent that data. Again, data representation, we already covered the various ways through which we do that. And of course, the meetings. So those are the tools and techniques that we can use as a part of control quality. And let's move on to the outcomes. What do we expect by the end of this? We certainly expect quality control measurements. So we ensure that we've got the quality control measurements in place. We have verified deliverables. So whatever the deliverables that are committed at that phase or at that point in time on the project, we have verified those against the requirements that are given by the customers. Work performance information in itself, how are we performing against the plan? Change requests, project management plan would get updated as a result of that, including the project documents. So this is what we can expect in the form of outcome. So this covers the control quality aspects as well. So we started with the quality management plan, then we looked into how we can manage quality overall, and then how would we control quality. So in today's webinar, our focus was around quality and how we can maintain quality on the project by implementing these three processes as a part of the quality management. So when we ensure that we are implementing these processes as a project manager, as a team, in a way, we are assuring our customer that what we are building in the form of that product, service, or a result is fit for your use and is as per the expectations that are given by you. So that confidence we can give it to the customer by implementing these quality management processes. And that will certainly make the team give the results to the team which can deliver repeatedly, not just one times, and the team which is also predictable. So that predictability and repeatability is something that is really important, and that gives a lot of trust on the team as well. So this was just the gist of quality management. We have covered it at a high level. We do a deep dive when we deliver the PMP training program. We get into each of these tools and techniques, inputs, and the outcomes much in more detail, in fact. And we also take a lot of different examples as a part of this. But in this webinar, we have just given you the introduction to quality management as a part of the quality management knowledge area within PMBOK 6th edition. So I thank you once again for you all to participate in the webinar, and I hope this webinar was useful to you. I wish you all the best for your PMP exam. Thank you.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!